an amoeba-like, or paramecium, split into two things, and the defensive people went at the wrong one.
When you think of elusive runners, the first players who come to mind are running backs.
Whoa! Lightning in the bottle. That's what he is.
Tomlinson's nasty.
While a majority of the game's slippery runners come out of the backfield, this countdown isn't limited to running backs alone.
That's insane.
That is. When making our list, we considered players from all offensive positions. The only requirement was that a player met our definition of an elusive runner.
How did he do that? He is driving him crazy. Damn! I had him!
When you're talking about the great elusive runners, you're talking about speed and quickness.
He's gone! He's gone!
But you're also talking about a sense of invention and creativity.
A move that Mikhail Baryshnikov couldn't make.
The woods are full of straight runners. We see them every day. It's not the straight runner that's a great football player.
You'd be amazed at some of the things they could do when you think the linebacker was going to make an easy tackle, and all of a sudden he comes up with air.
This is poetry, where the moves and the grace count as much as the yards.
The number 10 most elusive runner of all time, Willie Gallimore.
He was, without a doubt, the fastest human being on a football field. If he got loose, goodbye.
From 1957 to 1963, Willie the Wisp blazed across the gridiron like a comet on a collision course with football immortality.
Willie Gallimore was a blur. He was the first guy that I ever saw that had that speed. Like, whoo!
Willie's top speed is too fast for the Colts. Gallimore gets into the open and turns in an 84-yard touchdown gallop.
He could cut on the dime and then accelerate. A lot of backs can't do that.
He had that sixth sense, not only of what's coming up from behind him, but being able to look straight on and make that juke, that sudden move, and then that sudden burst.
Buddy Parker, who coached the Lions, said, in the open field, Willie Gallimore would be hard to hit with a handful of rice. So many of his great runs would come where he wouldn't follow the design pattern of the play, and Willie's answer to that was, anyone can run where the blockers are, but a great runner finds his own holes.
He was one of those guys, as a Colts fan, the last thing in the world you wanted to ever see was his hands with the ball, because something's going to happen.
Willie Gallimore reverses his field, bobbles the ball, gets it back, shakes off tackler after tackler on a spectacular touchdown gallop.
He would be a guy who was better remembered today. A problem Willie ran into was that he broke down. He had some injuries. His prime was not that long. And then he had the tragedy of being in a car accident.
In 1964, Gallimore and a teammate were killed in a car accident returning to Bears training camp. Despite never gaining more than 1,000 yards in a season, this shooting star's legacy still burns bright.
Other than Gale Sayers, there is not a more thrilling or extraordinary piece of footage than Willie Gallimore in the open field.
Coming up on Top 10, which of these elusive runners looked like a cartoon character?
In those days, the running backs took a tremendous beating.
Sarge regularly beats up Beetle Bailey and leaves him in a big mess. And that's what he looked like.
In the 1960s, the wide-open AFL had plenty of elusive runners. Paul Lowe of the Chargers, Paul Robinson of the Bengals, and Mike Garrett from the Chiefs. Just ask Hank Stram.
65 toss power trap.
Running play
looking to get on a drop touchdown. 65 Tyler Trash. Yeah.
But none of these AFL stars sliced through a defense like the next player on our list.
The number 9 most elusive runner of all time, Dickie Post.
Once upon a time, this hard-scrabbled horseman was one of the fastest thoroughbreds in pro football.
Dickie Post is one of the forgotten players, which is too bad, because he was exciting. I mean, he was fun to watch.
Post is 5 feet 9 inches, 190 pounds. His teammates call him Mouse. The Mouse turns Tiger.
The open field was the open seas for Dickie Post, and the 1967 AFL Rookie of the Year charted courses only he could navigate.
Dickie Post had great traffic burst. He could be in a glut of defenders, and in an instant, he could go from second gear to fifth gear and be through it.
By the time I was step and a half, I was almost full speed. And then you're starting to look to wherever the daylight is.
Some of his runs, you just sat back and run that again. Oh, do you want to see the block you made, Mix? No, I want to see Dickie.
Dickie Post was like a little gnat, and you can't get the son of a gun. He is just all over the place.
It was almost like watching a crab sort of scuttling from one side of the field to the other.
Our number 9 elusive runner never flashed his claws. In fact, this frightened rabbit of a runner wanted to avoid contact altogether.
I was more of a nervous runner, paranoid. It's not a style that anybody would want to copy if you can find somebody else. It consumed so much energy. By the half, I was totally exhausted.
He came into San Diego and was an immediate success. And he decided to try to capitalize on it, open a clothing store.
This shirt with a tie? You gotta be kidding, really? A guy came in about an hour ago and had on Stars and Stripes belt. And really looked nice.
Looked like an old Indian.
No Indian head. Just straight from the reservation, Oklahoma.
Being from Oklahoma originally, I never felt comfortable in California. I tried the type of thing that they enjoy doing down there. I had a good time. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, it was a nice party.
It seemed the hounds would never catch this hare. But they began to nip at his heels, then took bites out of his legs.
In those days, the running backs took a tremendous beating.
We had one guy who just cold-cocked him, caught him from behind. I remember the crowd going, we didn't think Dickie Post was ever going to get up again.
And I don't know if you've ever seen that silly cartoon called Beetle Bailey. Sarge regularly beats up Beetle Bailey and leaves him in a big mess. And that's what Dickie would look like.
The beatings eventually took their toll. Our number 9 elusive runner only lasted 5 years in the hard-knock life of pro football.
Dickie flashed bright as long as he could, and then he was gone.
The number 8 most elusive runner of all time, Joe Washington.
First down, Joe Washington to carry. Got blockers inside the 10, the 5, still on his feet to the 2, leads to the 1, did he make it? Touchdown, Joe Washington! That little devil pushed 3 people into the end zone. He is a little devil, isn't he?
Little Joe Washington bedeviled tacklers for 9 seasons with 4 teams. Like Dickie Post, our number 8 most elusive runner was vertically challenged. At 5'9" and 170 pounds, many thought he was too small to play in the pros. That perception would change on a Monday night in 1978.
I think Joe Washington to this day had the greatest performance ever on Monday Night Television. He had a long run for a touchdown. He caught a touchdown pass. He threw a touchdown pass, then won the game in overtime with a kickoff return and pouring down rain.
15, upfield, still on his feet, out of the open momentarily, and he's going to be caught. No, he is. He's on his feet. Washington is going down into New England territory. Still in the He's going to score!
I knew I had a special talent in being able to carry the football and do different things as far as cutting, changing direction that only a few can do.
what electrifying running. He's dynamite.
You have your slashers, you have your power guys, but no one can go full tilt and just stop and change directions, and that's what Joe could do.
He taught me that the key attribute to a running back is quickness, not speed, and he was about as quick stop and go as I was ever around.
Joe was just a heads-up smart, very, very, very smart player, and could really open up a game just like that.
Ducks in, spins down to about the 6, and then got popped by linebacker Sam Hunt, and then bounces off and goes in. What a run!
When little Joe arrived in D.C., Joe Gibbs had the bright idea to pair him with the Big Diesel.
Snap, hand to Riggins, good hold. He's got the first down to the 40. He's gone! Touchdown, Washington Redskins!
I mean, you got Riggins and Joe Washington. I mean, that's the original 1-2 punch.
Riggins' thunder and Washington's lightning created a perfect storm. In 1983, the Redskins leveled the opposition, scoring a then-record 541 points.
He was used really effectively, being brought in so he could create matchups and dictate matchups in the passing game.
Looking into the end zone, throws it over the middle to Washington. Touchdown, Joe Washington!
He was a weapon, and they couldn't use him enough.
I showed people at 170 pounds, you can play full time.
Still to come on Top 10 Elusive Runners. Find out which quarterback made our list.
Did you see that smoke coming off of Mike Vick's shoes?
Goes left 15, Young 10, Young 5, touchdown! Tight!
While sifting through hours of footage, we came across plenty of elusive runners who played quarterback. Here are a few that just missed the cut.
He's going to run. He should make it. Touchdown 49ers.
Nowadays, Donovan McNabb is more of a pocket passer. But early in his career, number 5 knew how to make defenders miss.
He's at the 15. He's at the 10. He's at the 5. He's in for the touchdown.
The first to shake like that was Fran Tarkenton. Widely credited for inventing the scramble, Tarkenton paved the way for today's mobile pass chuckers.
Many people have asked me how I got started scrambling.
Tennessee's number 10, Vince Young, might be the next Fran Tarkenton. Just ask Mario Williams.
Young steps up. He gets away. 25-20, 15, 10, 5. Titans win!
MVPs, Super Bowl titles, and the Hall of Fame, Steve Young could do it all, including making tacklers look silly.
Young, in trouble. He's going to be sacked. No, gets away. He runs, gets away again, goes to the 40. Young is in trouble, and he got away somehow. Gets away again to the 35. Cuts back at the 30. Young might score to the 20, the 15, the 10. He died. Touchdown 49ers.
While all these QBs were elusive, none was as shifty as the next player on our countdown.
The number 7 most elusive runner of all time, Randall Cunningham.
I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback who had as much basic physical talent.
Randall Cunningham absolutely belongs on a list of elusive runners. He had that real cat-like sense of people around him.
The old philosophy, keep somebody in the spy, but the spy guy couldn't catch him anyways.
He did it differently than anybody else, and he could just flat out fly.
He's leaping. He's diving. He's in. Randall, the acrobat, leaps into the end zone. Touchdown, Cunningham!
Some of the things I did on the field, I don't know how I did them.
It was almost like he was made of rubber.
The guy had a body like Gumby. The thing could bend in any direction.
Randall Cunningham faking and ducking and weaving and bobbing. I don't know how he did it. I think we're looking at Plastic Man.
You know, I could have had probably another 15 sacks on my career total if it wasn't for that doggone guy.
Man, I keep beating this guy, and Randall still runs out around. He gets wide. I don't understand it.
In 1990, our number 7 most elusive runner scrambled for 942 yards, 26 shy of Bobby Douglas's then NFL record. The Ramblin' Randall Show was at its peak.
He's leaping, he's diving, he's in. Cunningham is rolling, being chased. He's going to run, he's going to go in for the touchdown.
If you wanted a highlight film every week of Randall Cunningham, you could have it. Win or lose, you could have it. And I think there was too many times he got caught up in that.
People call me and they always say, why do you think you can fly? I said, I'm an eagle.
I mean, the play that people will always remember was the play in Buffalo.
Cunningham is back. He's being trapped. He ducks under 3 men. He's looking. He's rolling. He's heaving it deep downfield for Barnett, who leaps and has it. Barnett's going to score!
In a lot of ways, I mean, that play is really kind of Randall's career in a microcosm. One of a kind, and yet didn't win.
Although our number 7 most elusive runner never won a championship with his legs, his ability impacted NFL history.
I think he helped to change the game of football. I think a running quarterback became something that teams would look for, and we've seen quarterbacks that are close, but I don't think we've seen another Randall Cunningham since.
The Rambo Show.
The number 6 most elusive runner of all time, Red Grange.
In the fall of 1924, the public's interest in football was awakened by the sensational breakaway running of a University of Illinois halfback named Red Grange.
He just did things on a football field that were phenomenal, that people just hadn't heard of or seen before.
Football to that point had been a game of real power players. Red Grange was probably the first of his kind in terms of what we would now define as a broken field runner.
One thing I don't believe a coach can do is teach anybody to carry a football. Those are instincts. You do the thing that comes natural to you.
You just met up with the shiftiest hips in football.
In the mid-1920s, the name Red Grange was synonymous with football in the same way that Babe Ruth was synonymous with baseball.
He was this enormous star, and he became an enormous star because of the media that was available that covered his games and that brought his games into Americans' consciousness.
Well, Galloping Ghost was a nickname that actually a Chicago sports writer first had come up with while Red was at the University of Illinois. But it was Randall Rice, who was a much more famous writer of the time, who actually immortalized him, referred to him as the Gray Ghost in a little poem that he wrote after watching him play. And eventually became the Ghost, the Galloping Ghost, galloping obviously reflecting on his speed and his running style.
His whole backstory and his personality had a lot to do with it. Working class kid who delivered ice summers to stay in shape and to make money. I think a lot of people related to that.
Football, as anything else, as baseball or basketball or professional tennis, serves more or less as a means for a young fella coming out of college to get himself a little stake of money.
Our number 6 most elusive runner used his skills to land a lucrative pro contract. Although only credited by NFL record books with 569 yards rushing, less than Lawrence Phillips and Kajana Carter, Grange's impact on the league was immeasurable.
His first game, 36,000 people showed up. I mean, nobody had drawn those kinds of numbers before. He gave the whole idea of pro football validity. He made people want to watch it.
George and myself went to the White House and met the president, and we were introduced as George Halas and Red Grange with the Chicago Bears. President Calvin Coolidge's remark, he said, "I always like animal acts."
We're 80 years later, and if you mention the name Red Grange, people know who you're talking about. And you look back on his statistics, they look pretty ordinary, but you measure him by impact and what he did to advance the sport, and that's why people remember him.
Coming up on Top 10, who scored a touchdown on his very first carry?
Frankie Albert calls a timeout. Albert gets down on the ground and starts drawing the play. I swing out and goes 40 yards for a touchdown.
And why are we talking about steak?
He was sort of like filet mignon
to Jim Brown's sirloin.
We're counting down the most elusive runners in NFL history. Let's run through the list so far.
Number 10, Willie Gallimore leaves before his time. Number 9, a mighty might Bugs defenders.
Dickie Post was like a little gnat, and you can't get the son of a gun.
Number 8, Little Joe Washington beats the odds.
I show people at 170 pounds, you can play full time.
Number 7, Randall Cunningham defies gravity.
Randall, the acrobat.
Number 6, Red Grange revolutionizes the game.
He just did things on the football field that people just hadn't seen before.
The number 5 most elusive runner of all time, Bobby Mitchell.
Number 5. Bobby was sort of like filet mignon to Jim Brown's sirloin. Bobby was just served up in smaller portions, but they were always very tasty.
Our number 5 most elusive runner began his career as Jim Brown's backfield mate. Mitchell's mind-bending open field running was the perfect complement to Brown's power. Together, they were a mouth-watering combination.
Mitchell shows some of his hurdling ability gained as a college trackman.
Bobby Mitchell, he was a Big Ten sprint champion, hurdles champion. He had very sort of loose ankles, almost floppy. He could change directions like a fish. Just everything was quick, not necessarily graceful.
He was here, he was there, and he was there and there before you could blink. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, it was inhuman.
There's an old thing about give him a leg and take it away. There would be a leg, but when the tackler went for it, it was gone.
The problem that Bobby had is that Paul Brown, his coach, had tapped him as a fumbler. Brown eventually traded Bobby to the Redskins.
Whoa! I'm going to the Washington Redskins, of all places?
He played for George Preston Marshall, which wasn't partial to blacks, okay? And Mitchell was kind of like the first black he had on the team.
In Washington, the Redskins moved Mitchell from halfback to wide receiver. Fortunately, his dazzling run-after-the-catch skills remained, and they were on full display in his return to Cleveland.
Steve goes back to pass. He hit Bobby Mitchell over the center and watched the ex-Brownie turn it on for his old coach and teammate.
And I hit it right for Paul Brown.
And I'm trying to figure out, where is he going? You know, where's he going?
When I get at the sideline, I immediately made a right turn. And I don't, to this day, know how I made that turn.
I think Bobby made 16 people miss all 11 players once and 5 more twice.
Out of the corner of my eye, I am still looking at Paul Brown, Jim Brown, and Wooten as they're turning, walking back toward the bench because they know I'm gone.
And of course, Paul went crazy. Of all the guys to come back and beat him, he let Bobby Mitchell come back. Oh, he went, wow.
I would take these films home. You'd be sitting there at midnight and going back and forth. You'd be amazed at some of the things they could do when you think the linebacker would make an easy tackle, and all of a sudden he comes up with air. Linebackers hate to miss.
He was the first one that I ever saw that perfected that sort of high stepping into the end zone to finish off runs, something that Walter Payton did later in his career.
15 to 10 to 5. He dances into the end zone.
Mitchell retired with over 14,000 combined yards. This Hall of Famer proved that even elusive runners can play wide receiver.
The number 4 most elusive runner of all time, Hugh McElhenney.
4. He was my mom's favorite player, still is to this day. And he had a long stride and breakaway speed. He had style.
In the 1950s and early 60s, Hugh McElhenney was to pro football what Elvis Presley was to rock and roll. Both were known as the King, and each knew how to shake, rattle, and roll.
Hugh McElhenney remained atop his throne as the king of football's broken field runners.
Watching him run the football was almost like a kid's game because he'd get the ball in the open field and there was just no telling where he was going to go with it. He probably had more 120-yard runs that only measured 40 yards than anybody in NFL history.
He was sort of a hero among all of us because he looked like what a pro football player should look like. He would walk in a restaurant, they would say, "There's the king."
He was Barry Sanders, Gale Sayers, all kind of wrapped into one, and at the same time himself. Really great, elusive running backs, but also had that great north-south instinct too.
The first time our number 4 most elusive runner touched the ball, it was apparent he would be special.
I'm standing on the sideline. I haven't had a playbook. I don't know. Frankie Albert calls a timeout. Comes over the sideline, tells Buck Shaw, put McElhenney in. And Buck says he didn't know what the play. That's okay. We get in the huddle. Albert gets down on the ground and starts drawing the play. I swing out. He pitches the ball to me and it goes 40 yards for a touchdown. My very first play.
It's Hurricane Hugh McElhenney of the 49ers cutting a path as the 49ers jump away to a 7-0 lead.
McElhenney played in what became known as the $1 million backfield in San Francisco. 4 Hall of Famers. They had Wyatt Tittle at quarterback, they had McElhenney, they had Joe the Jet Perry, and they had John Henry Johnson. And the famous line Johnson had about it was, "I'm still looking for the million."
In the early 50s, a lot of players went both ways, played offense and defense. And Hugh was just on offense. And originally, he was criticized as a specialist who couldn't do anything but run. But to those critics, his head coach, Red Strader, said, "Was Chopin criticized because he could only play the piano?" When Hugh McElhenney retired, they gave him a plaque. And the inscription read, "Wouldn't football be a beautiful game if everyone played it like Hugh McElhenney?" That is a fitting epitaph for one of the greatest elusive runners of all time.
Still to come, what runner always had players and coaches checking the weather report?
I always prayed for a sunshiny day when we were going against him.
In today's game, there are dozens of elusive runners who got the stiff arm on our list. Often overlooked and sometimes forgotten, Brian Westbrook is a master at dodging defenders.
He's at the 5. He's in for the touchdown. Brian Westbrook.
In 2006, LaDainian Tomlinson made plenty of players miss on his way to the single-season touchdown record.
Green, 83. And the handoff to Tomlinson. Left side, and he will gallop into the end zone. Charger fans are witnesses to history.
Devin Hester knows a thing or two about scoring records. He returned an NFL record 5 kicks for touchdowns his rookie year.
Got to watch that kid there. He can go 80 to 90 at any time.
To the middle of the 15, to the 20, breaks free of the 25, to the 30, to the outside.
I told you he can go 90 at any time.
Reggie Bush can also go the distance, and his electrifying moves helped the Saints win a division title.
That was unbelievable.
While Bush had a remarkable season, he'll have to have a bunch more to match the Hall of Fame credentials of our next elusive runner.
Diving for the pylon. Yeah, he's in. The number 3 most elusive runner of all time, Marshall Faulk.
For 5 seasons with the Colts, Marshall Faulk was one of the game's most evasive backs.
Marshall Faulk on a beautiful zigzag run.
But when our number 3 most elusive runner was traded to the Rams, he became an all-purpose megastar.
Going into the 99 season, we were a very good football team. When he got there, the horsepower went from like a 300 horsepower to 500 horsepower.
This was a terrific job by Mike Martz in understanding what Marshall Faulk could do, recognizing his unique set of attributes that allowed him to become an explosive player with the St. Louis Rams.
The Rams deployed their new weapon as much as possible, and it paid off with a Super Bowl title.
The super season ends with a Super Bowl victory for the Rams.
Superman, number 28. Check him out.
I don't know how many people know what a supercharger is. Pop! Pop! It takes gasoline and pours it to the rest of the cylinders, and all of a sudden it all runs better. That's Marshall Faulk.
Forget the big red S. Superman wears a 2 and 8 on his chest. Did you just see that?
Should have been illegal.
Well, he wasn't a physical specimen. He didn't look like much when you saw him. But when he had that rock in his hand and he was moving around, he was a beast. He could do it all.
Absolutely remarkable.
Marshall Faulk had unique receiving abilities. Marshall Faulk could have been a top 5 or 10 wide receiver in the National Football League.
He was an absolute nightmare for a defensive coordinator to game plan because you didn't know where 28 was going to line up.
Defensive coordinators, anything is possible.
In 1999, our number 3 most elusive runner joined Roger Craig as the only other back in history to record over 1,000 yards rushing and receiving in the same season. This MVP also racked up over 2,000 multi-purpose yards in 4 consecutive years.
Takes the handoff, left and right, looking for a hole, bounces back left inside the 5 to the goal line, touchdown, baby! What a run!
There's a set place where the player is supposed to go. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. And then from there, it's what's inside of you.
What an effort by Marshall Faulk!
Marshall's one of those guys that could transfer what his eyes see to his feet and respond without even thinking about it. Plus, he was very elusive in a very short area.
And then some more. Breaks a tackle at the 25, to the 20, heading to the outside, to the 10, to the 5. Touchdown, Rams!
Hey, Marshall, we didn't block anybody. Hey. We didn't block anybody. That was a hell of a run.
Can you tell me why we pay that guy that much money? That was sweet there.
I understand the game of football. I really do. When we break the huddle, they line up. I've thought the play out already. I already have a feeling of what's going to happen.
Backs, particularly in the pass game, need to understand fronts and blitzes the same as the quarterback. Marshall Faulk was outstanding at that.
That was the Charger Grizzly look. And the guy, instead of him being on the line, he was walked. And Tuck going out to him, so I got the stack back guy.
He was the reason that we were the greatest show on turf. He allowed a versatility within our offense that I don't know if we could have had if we had anybody else back there.
Marshall was the glue for everything. He really was.
What else can Marshall Faulk do for this football team?
We use the term in the NFL, great player, too often. And there's a lot of other very good ones. Not many that ever compared with him in the total package of what he could do with a football.
Up next, which of these 2 runners had Bill Cosby seeing double?
I saw him split like an amoeba, and the defensive people went at the wrong one.
Through the years, the NFL has had plenty of great running backs. Graceful Lenny Moore scored touchdowns in a record 18 consecutive games.
Lenny Moore with a good move. He'll go down as one of the great all-time running backs.
Mercury Morris helped the Dolphins to a perfect season, and Walter Payton became the greatest of all time.
Walter Payton becomes the National Football League all-time leading rusher, surpassing Jim Brown.
Well, for 18 seasons anyway.
Smith at left guard, 35. Move over, sweetness. Make a place for Emmett.
But none of those stars moved through the football galaxy quite like the Kansas Comet.
The 15 to the 10, he broke the tackle to the 5. Touchdown!
The number 2 most elusive runner of all time, Gale Sayers.
Give me 18 inches of daylight. That's all I need.
Probably needed a little bit more than that, but I had the quickness and the ability to see a hole and get there. I was very, very comfortable on the football field. I know I had a God-given talent. It was very easy for me.
If you talk to Gale, he almost talks in the third person. You say, Gale, how did you do that? He said, well, Gale went this way. He's just like it's another guy out there.
Moves like his could have only come from another planet. When Sayers' snake-charming stump started pumping, it often left tacklers mesmerized.
The one thing that we tried to do the hardest when we played this guy was not watch him run. I mean, he ran so pretty, you could get caught coasting and watching him do it, man. I mean, he was flat out good.
His accomplishments reflect skills that are his by instinct. His moves are dictated by intuition.
I remember Brian Piccolo once saying of Gale Sayers that Gale had such unusual peripheral vision that he could see his own ears. Sometimes when you watch Gale run, you almost think that he also had eyes in the back of his head.
I saw him an amoeba-like, paramecium, split into two things, and the defensive people went at the wrong one.
Some of these guys that are elusive have great quickness and ability to elude, but don't have blazing speed. When it came time to outrun everybody, he outran everybody on the field.
I was the long snapper for the Packers, and I was a rookie. Sayers had already broken through the first wave, and it was him and me in the open field, but I had him hemmed up on the sideline. And when I went to bump him out of bounds, he simply added a gear. It was not like anything I had ever seen. He just went...
In 1965, our number 2 most elusive runner had one of the greatest rookie seasons of all time, scoring an NFL rookie record 22 touchdowns.
He only touched the ball, rushing, receiving, returning kicks 232 times that season. So he was averaging a touchdown about every 10 times he touched the ball. Just amazing.
Even more remarkable was the 6 touchdowns he scored against the 49ers at rain-soaked Wrigley Field.
Gale Sayers sprints past the prospectors for a touchdown.
Well, everybody was playing on a muddy field except him.
He was in mud up to here. I mean, his feet must be that long, and he ran flat-footed, man. And he's the perfect mudder.
He returned punts, he returned kickoffs, he caught passes for touchdowns, he ran for touchdowns. Nobody could bring him down.
They were slipping in, we weren't slipping, probably because, I knew where I was going and they didn't.
He could have had 7. I think George Halas held him out.
I would have to say in the history of football, it was the greatest single game display I've ever seen.
It's a feat that, I'll always remember. It was just one of those days that you like to relive over and over again.
Always prayed for a sunshiny day when we were going against him.
In 1968, our number 2 most elusive runner couldn't outrun a knee injury, and the Kansas Comet soon burned out. Sayers' career lasted only 68 games.
If Gale Sayers had had the surgical techniques that exist today, he might still be playing.
There's almost a cult now to try to keep his memory as a great, great player. To me, he's the greatest halfback I ever saw.
This guy made the Hall of Fame in 5 years. You got to understand that. That's unheard of.
Coming up,
Number one.
we'll reveal the number 1 most elusive runner on our list.
Number 1, baby.
Before we unveil our most elusive runner, let's recap the list.
Number 10, Willie Gallimore smokes opposing defenses.
Will the win. Jakes off tackler after tackler.
Number 9, Dickie Pose tunes in and turns on.
I had a good time. Don't get me wrong. It was a nice party.
Number 8, Little Joe Washington plays big.
Titillating, dynamite, dazzling runner. What electrifying running.
Number 7, Randall Cunningham bounces to the top.
It was almost like he was made of rubber.
Number 6, the Galloping Ghost turns pro.
36,000 people showed up. Nobody had drawn those kinds of numbers before.
Number 5, Bobby Mitchell gets his revenge.
Of course, Paul went crazy. Of all the guys to come back and beat him.
Number 4, Hugh's moves make him football royalty.
Hugh McElhenney remained atop his throne as the king of football's broken field runner.
Number 3, Marshall Faulk plays like a superhero.
Forget the big red S. Superman wears a 2 and 8 on his chest.
Number 2, Gale Sayers scores 6 touchdowns.
Well, everybody was playing on a muddy field except him.
The number 1 most elusive runner of all time, Barry Sanders.
Number 1.
Probably the only running back I would pay to see play.
Sometimes you just got to look to the heavens and say, wow. Oh, my gosh, what a run.
You almost had to stop what you were doing just to see what Barry's going to do because you know he was going to do something amazing.
Oh, that is one of the great runs you'll ever see, folks. That one is a highlight reel special.
Barry's my new idol now. I love the way the guy runs. When I grow up, I want to run just like him.
I had to probably turn off the brain in certain ways and just, react.
It's not always where the play is designed. I was never the type of runner that could run straight through someone. I always had to find another way to get around them.
Barry Sanders with a move that Mikhail Baryshnikov couldn't make.
We know we got to tackle this guy. One guy, we can't depend on one guy to tackle this guy.
We got to corral that little Barry Sanders.
Well, there's a lot of that went on.
I used to tell guys, defensive players, don't let this guy make you do the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer was Barry would get in front of you, you try to make a tackle, and you clap your hands and you fall down your knees.
Barry! I can't get no love! You get no love, Barry?
Not even trash talk could knock Barry off his game. Our number 1 most elusive runner averaged 5 yards per carry for his career. During his 2,000-yard season in 1997, he posted a record 14 consecutive 100-yard games.
And the give to Barry Sanders. Cut back over the middle to 15. Breaks a tackle to the 10. Barry to the 5. Barry in. Touchdown!
He could freeze you and then beat you, make you stop, and while you were stopping to break down, he was gone. Nobody could stop and start like that.
We felt the only way we could even simulate his movement at practice was to get a couple of chickens and have our 300-pound linemen try to corral him and chase him and box him in and corner him and cut him off.
For all his greatness, Sanders was always criticized for 2 things: never winning a championship and running for the most negative yards in NFL history.
There might have been a couple of -3, -5, -2 runs, but it's the Detroit Lions.
And Sidney Crawford had too many birthmarks, I guess, too, right?
I don't really hold that against him. They did not have an offensive line. These guys were like the worst offensive line in the world.
He really never had a real offense. I mean, he was the guy, and he had to, basically run for his life just to make a 4-yard gain.
For 10 years, Sanders carried the Lions. By 1998, number 20 was closing in on Walter Payton's all-time rushing record. But then, without warning, Sanders retired.
It takes everything in you, really, to be good at it. I think you have to play it for the love of it. Once that leaves, I think it's time to leave. I was within striking distance of the record. It's a great record to have, but to play only because of the record is something that I didn't have it in me to do.
Whether you agree or disagree with his decision, there is one fact that you can't dispute. Barry Sanders is undoubtedly the number 1 elusive runner of all time.
If you put the history of the great backs in a phone booth and said who could get out of this phone booth without getting tackled, Barry would be the guy.
When we watch NFL films and we see the great runs of all time, most of them are Barry Sanders.
He was just one of those once-in-a-generation kinds of players.
Barry Sanders may be one of a kind, but all the players on our list impacted the game in their own unique way. Together, they made NFL history as the most elusive runners of all time.